Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Hey, welcome to Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 52, and it's Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. If this is the first time that you're finding the show or watching the show, glad to see you here. And then if you're returning from another episode or some other content, glad to see you back and getting your fix of cyber threat intel. With that being said, if you need to grab a snack or a drink or something to get you through the content, make sure you go do that first before we keep going. And then also, if you want to see all the articles that we cover, as well as some other articles that we didn't have time for in the show, then head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com, and you can find all the information about the show on there. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop on over to my screen and get into the content. All right, first article, MITRE says U.S. government needs to focus on critical infrastructure. MITRE, the nonprofit and engineering consultancy, has outlined a set of priorities for the next presidential administration to focus on, regardless of who wins the 2004 election. So if you don't know who MITRE is, MITRE focuses a lot on cybersecurity and information security, and they have a lot of different frameworks for different attacks and all kinds of useful tools for cybersecurity. So MITRE's Don't Trust But Verify, Strengthening U.S. Leadership to Safeguard Our Cyber Defenses memo identifies areas for prioritization, including preparing for advances in quantum computing, protecting critical infrastructure, clarifying leadership roles, and implementing a zero trust framework within the federal government. So, and then this gets into the priorities. So priority 1 is to protect critical infrastructure. MITRE calls for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, DHS, to update recovery plans for the sector within 6 months and large-scale critical infrastructure attacks to its national preparedness system. So if you haven't been tracking what's going on in the world, in the cyber world, critical infrastructure is one of these new hot buttons. This is one thing that traditionally we haven't thought of in the sense of cyber, but now that we're seeing that if a cyber attack were to take down something like the power grid, that's going to cause a tremendous amount of issues for us. If they affect water systems, anything like that, where it is a critical infrastructure system, that can cause a lot of issues for us. And especially as these are more and more connected to cyber systems, to information systems, that becomes more and more of a concern. So we have to evolve and we have to adapt. We have to include those in our nation's disaster recovery plans. It's not just enough to update the antivirus or do these basic kind of things. These are now needing to be included into the prioritization of these different incidents or situations that might happen. It's just like any normal business when we're going through that whole process of disaster recovery and business continuity, incident response. How do we prioritize our critical systems if something were to happen? Standard cybersecurity 101 stuff, for sure. Priority 2, implement zero trust and SBOMs. To protect critical infrastructure, the federal government should fully migrate to zero trust and require secure software development via SBOMs within the first 6 months of the new administration. So zero trust, that's another hot button in cybersecurity. This idea of not just inherently trusting things because they are on the inside network. It's one of these things that is getting companies in a lot of trouble, and it's kind of the traditional way we've done things, where we've really invested into the perimeter of our networks. So things like firewalls or VPNs, things to keep people out of our networks. But what's happening is these attackers are getting into our networks, and then once they're on the inside, they're just trusted because it's considered the inside of the network. It's a trusted zone. And so we are seeing this shift across the board with all kinds of companies and within the career field itself, where we are not just thinking about the perimeter. We have to think about internal lateral movement, pivoting between different systems or networks. So this is a really important aspect of how things are going and how you should start to think about things in your organization. Priority number 3, prepare for quantum computing. Third priority is to get ready for cryptographically relevant quantum computers. So this is another thing that we've talked about on this show is quantum computing, which is the idea of immensely powerful computers. So these just extraordinarily powerful computers that can make doing certain computing tasks really just trivial. When we talk about passwords, for example, one of the things that we've always thought about is the longer the password, the more complex the password. So if it has numbers, if it has symbols, special characters, all of these different things, that it's more secure because it would take somebody so long to crack that password, and that's kind of the thought process. Well, with quantum computing, those passwords that might have taken 100 years to crack may only take a couple seconds or minutes or an hour or something very minimal, that now that is a serious concern as quantum computing starts to be mainstay. Now, you or me, just a normal person, we are not going to go out to the store and just buy a quantum computer. We're not going to go over to Best Buy and be able to pick up a quantum computer. That's just not going to happen. They're not at that level, or at least that minimal expense to go be able to do that. But we're talking about governments, nation states, so governments or companies that have tremendous amounts of money, they can most likely afford quantum computing, and they are the ones that are going to have it, especially the nation states. When we're talking about cybersecurity, that's one of the major concerns, is because there are certain countries or certain governments out there that are really going to invest in this, and they are really going to try to leverage it for bad reasons. So we have to be ready for that. We have to be prepared. We have to be ready to defend against that. And that is a great priority to have in there. Priority 4, clarify and strengthen authorities. The last of the top 4 priorities is to clarify the roles and responsibilities of cybersecurity leaders and organizations. So if you've been in an organization before where job roles are not clear, they're not clearly outlined or described or defined, it becomes very difficult to make decisions, to understand who's responsible for what, and that is very difficult. In a cybersecurity environment, one of the things that makes that challenging is who has the authority to make policies, who can really, in a sense, kind of throw their weight around or throw their power around to actually get cyber priorities completed. And if those are not clearly defined, there's no structure there to the organization, to the department, and that creates all kinds of issues. And there's no, when you're leading from the top down, or you have these priorities or these roles clearly defined, that person can push down priorities. They can set budgeting. They can arrange employees. They can do all these different things. But without that, again, it becomes very difficult to get anything done because everybody kind of is like, well, I don't know if I report to you. I don't know what I'm responsible for. I don't know what you're responsible for. It's all this confusion kind of wrapped up in this situation. So that is a very important thing. That's core to a security department. You'll find that in basically every security compliance certification out there, or framework or standard that you can find, is to clearly identify your roles. That needs to be clearly documented, the structure, the hierarchy, all that stuff. All right, let's keep moving here. Next article. Empire Market suspects potentially face life in prison for $430 million in dark web sales. Department of Justice charged 38-year-old Thomas Pavey and 28-year-old Raheem Hamilton with owning and operating Empire Market from 2018 to 2020 and previously conducting sales of counterfeit U.S. currency on now defunct criminal market Alpha Bay. The DOJ accused the pair of helping cybercriminals conduct nearly 4 million transactions through Empire Market, including sales involving heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, counterfeit currency, stolen credit card information, and more. Pavey and Hamilton are in custody awaiting arraignment in a Chicago federal court, the DOJ said. They face dozens of charges ranging from drug trafficking and computer fraud to counterfeiting and money laundering. Combined, these charges for each can result in a maximum sentence of life in federal prison. Life. That is a very substantial penalty, especially if you're 28, for example, in Hamilton's case, but even 38, life. You're talking, it could be 30, 40, 50, 60 years, 70 years. Probably not more than 70 years because maybe for Hamilton, but most likely not for Pavey because he's 38. Alpha Bay was shut down in a takedown coordinated by law enforcement across the globe in July 2017. One of the platform's administrators, Alexander Kazis, was arrested in Thailand and took his own life in jail 1 week after he was detained. When that platform was shut down in 2017, Hamilton and Pavey created and began running Empire Market on February 1st, 2018, prosecutors said. Transactions were conducted using cryptocurrency and buyers could rate sellers on the site. The two are administrators on the platform until August 22nd, 2020. Justice Department said that it seized $75 million worth of cryptocurrency over the course of their investigation into the platform. So, again, this is one of those things, right, where people are doing bad things. They're running marketplaces that are condoning illegal activities, sale of drugs or whatever else, and they got caught. This is a warning sign to anybody thinking about getting into this stuff, getting into these marketplaces or running these marketplaces, is that you will be caught and they're threatening life in prison. That is a substantial penalty that I don't think most people want to face, regardless of your views or your beliefs. Life in prison doesn't seem like all that great of a time. So keep that in mind. You might think this is just kind of a harmless computer crime or computer thing, but it comes with substantial penalties and they are getting really good at finding people. So law enforcement will come knocking on your door at one time and that'll be bad for you. But on the flip side, as a cybersecurity professional, it's important to understand these markets, understand what's going on with these things, and tracking activity that happens on some of these platforms, not partaking, right? Don't go on there and buy things, but certainly understanding and tracking what's going on in these marketplaces can help you identify what's a risk to your organization. Obviously, it would be bad if you go on there and you find data or something related to your organization, but it's better to know and to start preparing a reaction plan or response than just kind of going along in the world and not just ignoring whatever's happening on these platforms, because it will come back to haunt you if something related to your company or maybe potentially you pops up on these marketplaces. All right, next article. Los Angeles Public Health Department discloses large data breach. Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, DPH, has disclosed a data breach impacting more than 200,000 individuals. The incident, which took place between February 19th and 20th, 2024, so recently, was caused by an attacker gaining the login credentials of 53 public health employees through a phishing email. So not just one, 53 employees. That should show you that employees are vulnerable and they are susceptible to phishing attacks, especially. Local government department, which serves the approximately 10 million residents of LA County, said the information identified in the compromised email account may have included the following DPH clients, employees, and other individuals' data: first and last name and date of birth, diagnosis and prescription information, medical record number, patient ID, Medicare, Med-Cal number, health insurance information, and a social security number, and other financial information. DPH said, while public health cannot confirm whether information has been accessed or misused, Individuals are encouraged to review the content and accuracy of their information in their medical record with their medical provider. Impacted individuals are also being offered 1 year of free identity monitoring from Kroll. So think about this. With these different compliance certifications, there are requirements as far as if you have a breach, how many people are affected, or certain circumstances when you have to make a notification. Hopefully, you don't have to make a notification because that's not a fun time. You have to go through legal implications and thinking what you're going to say through, because what you say could also come back to haunt you. So you have to be very careful in how you phrase things and what you say. But this whole idea of not knowing whether information was accessed is another concern. That comes down to access logs and things of that nature. How closely are you monitoring your data, especially your sensitive data? Whenever you have sensitive data, you should absolutely be monitoring transactions and recording those transactions, maybe not necessarily the content of what is being included in there, because obviously if somebody updates their social security number, then if you are tracking that, if you're recording that, then now you have another place that has to be protected and encrypted and really closely guarded. So you have to still be careful with what you're monitoring, what you're recording. But the idea of not monitoring, viewing certain information or doing these certain things of sensitive data is, it's a concern, because then you don't really know a lot of times if it's been accessed. And especially in the incident situation of a breach, you're going to want to know that, because if you can very clearly show, hey, we monitor all the transactions, all the viewing of sensitive information or modifications of it, and you can show that, then you can very clearly say, hey, we have all this data, we have all these logs that show when this stuff was viewed or modified, updated, added, all that stuff, and none of that happened. So we can very confidently say that your data has not been accessed, but maybe the greater corporate network or something else within our network, maybe that was accessed. But we have good security in place, so we know that your data wasn't accessed. That's a better situation to be in, right? That makes your customers feel a lot better about your security efforts that you're putting into place. The next thing is this 1 year free identity monitoring. So if you haven't been following any incident like this before, typically what happens is you get 24 months or 2 years of credit monitoring. Here, they're only offering 1 year. So I find that interesting, because I'm not even a fan of the 2 year credit monitoring, because I feel like companies use that as a scapegoat, right? They boast that we're going to give you 2 years of free credit monitoring. Well, okay, yeah, I mean, that's like a given that you're going to do that. So that's become the norm. But then now 1 year is stepping back from that a little bit. I guess it's to save money. I'm not sure. But yeah, that's okay. DPH said it implemented numerous enhancements to its security posture to prevent similar phishing attacks occurring in the future. That's a good thing. Lessons learned. Learn from your mistakes. Upon discovering the attack, the department disabled impacted email accounts and reset and re-imaged the user's devices. Another good step, absolutely. So understanding how to contain an incident and then eradicate that from your network, all important steps as far as the incident response process. Keep in mind that if you're in a similar situation, completely re-imaging a system is really the main way that you can make sure you've gotten rid of an attacker on a specific system. That may not completely get rid of it from your network, because there may be other examples of where that attacker got into or things that they've done to maintain persistence. But one of the things that you don't want to do is restore a backup that is also compromised. And that's sometimes a situation that companies get into, is they're like, well, we have this backup, so we'll just restore that backup, and it's okay if we lose a little data. Well, what if that attacker wasn't just in your network or in your system for a week or a month or maybe a year. Maybe they were in there longer. You have to think about that and think about what you're doing, the response that you're taking, and if that makes sense to the situation at hand. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So you have to be really careful. Next article, notorious cyber gang UNC 3944 attacks vSphere and Azure. Notorious cyber gang UNC 3944, the crew suspected of involvement in the recent attacks on Snowflake and MGM Entertainment, and plenty more besides, has changed its tactics and is now targeting SaaS applications, so software as a service applications. According to Google's Mandiant Threat Intelligence Team, UNC 3944's activities have plenty of overlap with attack group variously known as Octopus, Octotempest, Scatterswine, and Scattered Spider. The group initially used credential harvesting and SIM swapping attacks in its operations. We actually talked about Scattered Spider yesterday. Moved on to ransomware and data theft extortion, but has now shifted to primarily data theft extortion without the use of ransomware. So we're seeing this shift in their tactics. It's always important to track that and pay attention to how things are shifting. Mandiant claimed it's heard recordings of UNC 3944's calls to corporate help desks, during which it attempts social engineering attacks. The threat actor spoke with clear English and targeted accounts with high privilege potential, Mandiant's researchers wrote last week. In some cases, callers already possess victims' personally identifiable information, allowing the attackers to bypass identity verification checks. It's always a dangerous thing when attackers can just reuse personal identifiable information. And sometimes that might not be the best sole check in order to verify an identity. Maybe you want to ask for some of that stuff, but then ask for something else too. Something that just that user will know or just that user set. So multi-factor authentication comes in a lot of different forms, and personally identifiable information especially, so much of that is out there that solely relying on that is dangerous, to say the least. So especially when nearly everybody's information has been compromised in some form or fashion. UNC 3944's crooked callers would often claim they were receiving a new phone, which necessitated a multi-factor authentication or MFA reset. If help desk staff allowed the reset, the attackers would reset passwords and bypass MFA requirements. If social engineering doesn't work, the gang may just threaten its targets. So it's an interesting, we're gonna go about this nicely, and then if you don't play nicely, we're just gonna come at you hard. So interesting. SaaS is another new frontier for UNC 3944, according to the article. Mandiant observed the group targeting VMware's vCenter management tools, CyberArk, Salesforce, Azure, CrowdStrike, AWS, and Google Cloud Platform. Office 365 was also another target. So again, tracking this change in tactics of this group, it's important to do. Mandiant advised that multiple detection opportunities exist to assist with the speedier identification of possible compromise, and recommended heightened monitoring of SaaS applications to include centralizing logs from important SaaS-based applications, MFA re-registrations, and virtual machine infrastructure, specifically about both uptime and the creation of new devices. These are all important things that you have to do. With SaaS applications, you have to monitor them. Central location, correlate the data. It's just like if you have a bunch of systems, a bunch of computers, you can't just stand up a computer or deploy a computer and not bring that into your monitoring solution. It's a very similar kind of situation. MFA, make people use MFA, make them enable MFA on their accounts. It's one of those things you just have to do. If you're not going to do it, then you're probably going to run into issues because passwords by themselves are not a secure authentication measure. All right, moving on here. China's Velvet Ant APT nests inside multi-year espionage effort. This kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about not knowing how long a attacker has been in your organization. Researchers have uncovered a multi-year campaign by China's Velvet Ant cyber espionage group to steal critical data from a large company in East Asia. Researchers from Signia, who finally booted the threat actor out of the organization's environment, attributed at least part of Velvet Ant's persistence to its success at finding and infecting numerous legacy and unmonitored systems on the target network. Signia discovered the intrusion at a customer location in late 2023. Security vendors' investigation showed the threat actor had likely gained access to the victim environment some 3 years previously and had remained undetected using multiple persistence and defense evasion mechanisms. So this is really important to understand. When you get breached, or when I should say you've been breached, that attacker could be in there forever. They could be in there for so long, and you could have just never caught them along the way. That happens so often. Now, that timeline varies. Could be a week, could be a month, could be several months, could be a year, could be several years, like in this case. So 3 years. It's a long time to not catch somebody. And the longer they're in there, a lot of times the more difficult it becomes to identify them, because then it just kind of becomes part of the network. And then eventually, for instance, if they had an account or something, or a rule or something that allowed them to maintain persistence, you kind of forget why that was there. So if you see something, right, you're like, well, I mean, it's not unreasonable that I kind of forgot why I did that 3 years ago. It's like, well, that's because you didn't do it 3 years ago. It was some attacker that got into your network. So it's so important, and that's where documentation comes into play, and reviews and understanding what your network should have versus what it does actually have. So really, really important. Signia's investigation showed the threat actor had installed the highly modular and once widely popular plug-X remote access Trojans on some legacy Windows Server 2003 systems. So these are very, very legacy and dated systems. From those infected systems, Velvet Ant actors moved laterally to newer Windows systems by first tampering with their endpoint detection and remediation, their EDR protections, and then installing plug-X on those too. Once Velvet Ant gained access to target systems, the threat actor leveraged a commonly used open source penetration testing and exploit development tool called Impacket to laterally transfer more malware tools and execute arbitrary commands on the compromised host. For remote command execution, the attackers use Impacket's WMI exec.py, so a Python script, Windows management instrumentation tool. So this is one of the really important things. This is why you have to get rid of legacy systems, because legacy systems will come back to haunt you. Once they are no longer supported by vendors, you're no longer getting patches, you're no longer getting releases or updates or anything like that, and they just become more vulnerable over time. So your focus as things are coming up for expiration or for end of life, your focus should be, how do we go from this current state with this soon-to-be legacy stuff to the new version or the new stuff? Because if you don't, you're going to end up with all this stuff that is vulnerable. Attackers may already be in there. They'll definitely be in there later over time, because you'll probably forget about some of this stuff too. And this stuff is just, it becomes kind of part of your network's fiber. So part of that core network. And then down the line, it becomes way more expensive to replace or update, migrate, do all these things, or way more difficult than if you would have just done it in the first place. We see companies do this a lot of times. They'll have a Windows XP or hopefully they don't have Windows XP, but Windows 2003, like in this case. And it's just a bad time. Spend the time up front, get rid of that stuff when it becomes end of life, so that as an organization, as an IT department, as a cybersecurity department, in 5-10 years, you're not saying to your customers, hey, we were running this legacy stuff and we just never upgraded it. But guess what? It got hacked and it had all your information that you probably wanted us to secure. So it's a bad look. It opens you up for more risk. It expands your attack surface because you have this legacy stuff, and attackers go for the low-hanging fruit. If they see you have one of these dated systems on your network, they're probably going to go for that first because it's going to be an easy win for them, and they're just going to be able to pivot or move laterally across your network and just get closer and closer to your crown jewels, as they were, right? And quote, your critical information, your sensitive information that you want to protect. So just get rid of that stuff. With that being said, that's the last article for today's episode of Cyber Threat Intel. Again, I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 52, and it is Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. If you want to check out all the articles that we covered in the episode, head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. You can find all that information there. And with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you in the next one. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.